How do you react when your own daughter screams at you to pay rent or get out, while she is standing in an apartment you secretly own? How far do you let the disrespect go before you stop trying to be the nice dad and let the law speak for you? This is how I sold the building under my daughter's feet and answered her panic call with one calm sentence. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Mark Ellis, and the first time my own daughter told me to pay rent or leave, I was holding 2 heavy grocery bags that I had bought for her with money I really should have kept for myself. I am 58 years old. My back hurts when I get up in the morning, and my hands have small white scars from years of work with tools. I look like what people think I am, just another maintenance guy in an old building, moving slow, wearing cheap boots, keeping my head down. Most people do not look twice at me. They step around me in the hallway when I carry ladders or paint buckets. They talk over me like I am part of the wall. Chloe is 26. She used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, and she used to draw crooked hearts with my name inside. Now she holds her phone instead, and the hearts belong to other people. That is normal, I guess. Kids grow up. But I was not ready for the day she decided I was not just not cool, but a problem she had to fix. That day started like most of my days. I woke up in my small one-story house on the edge of town. The roof needs work, but I always fix other roofs first. The coffee was weak because I stretched the bag 1 week too long. I ate toast without butter because I wanted to go by the store later, and I did not want my card to beep with an overdraft. Work was the usual mix of broken things and small complaints. A leaking pipe, a door that did not close right, a burned-out hallway light. I moved around the building with my toolbox, listening more than talking. People complain when they feel safe, and the building, Maple Court, has been their safe place for a while. I like that. I like when people feel they can relax in a place I keep standing. By late afternoon, my shirt was damp from sweat and bleach. I signed out at the office, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked to the discount grocery store on the corner. I knew Chloe's fridge was probably empty again. She and her boyfriend always seemed surprised when bills came, and groceries were the first thing they cut. I chose simple things: pasta, rice, eggs, chicken thighs on sale, a bag of frozen vegetables. I added some fruit because she used to eat apples with peanut butter while doing homework, and the memory made me smile. At the last second, I picked up her favorite chocolate bar. Old habit. The cashier rang everything up, and the total was higher than I wanted, but I told myself it was fine. A father buys food for his daughter. That is what fathers do. I swiped my card and felt a small knot in my stomach until the green light flashed. Approved. Maple Court looked tired in the early evening light. The bricks needed cleaning. The flower beds had more weeds than flowers. Someone had taped a printed meme about evil landlords beside the mailboxes. I looked at it for a second and then looked away. It was not worth the energy. Chloe lived in 3B with her boyfriend Ryan. They called it their first real place. The hall smelled like strong perfume and leftover takeout. I shifted the grocery bags in my hands and knocked with my elbow. Ryan opened the door. He is one of those young men who always look like they just left the gym, even if they did not. Tight t-shirt, big smile, phone in hand. He glanced at the bags and laughed. He said I was a lifesaver because they were completely broke until payday. He joked that landlords squeeze every drop, and there was nothing left for food. I smiled and told him it was no problem. I stepped inside, and the apartment looked like most starter apartments. Couch from a thrift store, 2 mismatched chairs, a TV that was too big for the room, plates in the sink, an almost empty fridge. Chloe came out of the bedroom in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt. Her face softened for a moment when she saw me. She asked what I was doing there, and I told her I had finished work nearby and brought some groceries. She opened the bags and made an exaggerated happy sound when she saw the chocolate. That small noise still hits me. We ate a simple dinner together. I cooked because I am faster, and they are happy to let someone else handle the stove. While the pasta boiled, Ryan sat on the couch and scrolled through his phone, talking loud about a group chat. He said tenants in the building were planning to push back against rent increases. He called the landlord greedy and lazy. He said people like that never fix anything and just sit on money. I stirred the sauce and kept my eyes on the pan. I have heard worse things. Chloe agreed with him right away. She said their rent was unfair, and after student loans and everything, they could not get ahead. She said adults like her parents had no idea how hard things were now for younger people. When she said parents, she only meant one person. It was not me. I tried, gently, to talk about budgeting. I mentioned that maybe one of them could take an extra shift at work for a while or cut back on takeout. I said I could help fix some things in the unit to save on calling outside services. I did not want to tell them what to do. I wanted them to feel supported, not judged. Ryan did not like that. He put his phone down and told me he did not need lectures from someone who, in his words, never figured out real money. Chloe told me with a small laugh not to mind him. She said he was just stressed because the landlord was raising rent again, and they needed every cent. I swallowed what I wanted to say. I did not tell them I knew the building better than they could imagine. I did not tell them I knew exactly how much rent had gone up over the last 10 years and why. I just said I understood and poured the pasta into a bowl. After dinner, we watched a show. Chloe leaned against Ryan, and I sat at the far end of the couch. At some point, she asked if I could stay the night. She said it helped her feel safe when I was around, especially with the creepy guy in 2A who played loud music. I did not want to refuse her. A night on the couch was fine. I have slept in worse places. I brushed my teeth in their bathroom with a small travel toothbrush I carry in my bag. The shower curtain rod was crooked. The tap dripped a little. My hands moved automatically, checking where the screws were loose, seeing what needed fixing. Old habits never fade. The night was short. The couch springs poked my back, and someone laughed in the hallway at 2 a.m. Still, I was glad to be near my daughter. I watched the light under her bedroom door go out and told myself that this was worth any small pain. The next morning, I woke up to voices in the kitchen. Ryan was talking louder than usual. His tone had a sharp edge. I sat up slowly, rubbing my neck. The apartment smelled like burnt coffee. Ryan came into the living room holding a crumpled bill in his hand. He said the utilities were higher again and asked how they were supposed to manage when they had extra people using water and electricity without paying. It took me a second to realize I was the extra people. I tried to explain that it was just one night and I had brought food and I always tried to help, not take. I said I did not mind giving them some money toward the bill if they really needed it. I reached for my wallet without thinking. Chloe walked in, pulling her hair into a messy bun. At first she looked tired, but as Ryan spoke, her shoulders stiffened. He told her they could not keep letting me crash without talking about it. He said he loved me as her dad, but things had to be fair. Then Chloe turned to me, and I saw something in her face I did not recognize. She said we needed to talk like adults. She said living on her own was hard, and she could not keep carrying extra weight. At first, her voice was calm. Then it rose. She said that if I wanted to stay over or come by often, I had to start paying my share of the rent and bills. She said she could not be my safety net. She said she was tired of feeling guilty when she told me no. The words kept coming, sharper and sharper. She said she had her own life now. She said she could not be responsible for me too. Then the sentence that cut through everything came out of her mouth in one loud rush. She told me that I needed to pay my rent or leave. The apartment door had been open a little, and noise travels in old buildings. I heard a chair scrape in the hallway. Someone whispered. Then I realized one of Chloe's roommates was standing in the doorway with her phone in her hand, the screen held up like a small, bright eye. Behind her, another tenant had stopped on the stairs to watch. I felt my face heat, not with anger, but with a kind of cold shame. It was not the money. Money comes and goes. It was the idea that my own child saw me as a man who was taking advantage of her, as some kind of parasite on her adult life. I told her I understood. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. I said I did not want to be a burden. I set my old wallet back in my pocket. My hands shook a little, so I clenched them until they were still. Chloe kept talking, like she could not stop now that she had started. She said she loved me, but she needed boundaries. She said if I could not respect that, I needed to stop coming by so much. She added one last line about how she was done helping a grown man who could not even keep his own roof. The roommate in the doorway made a quiet noise, half laugh, half sigh. Ryan crossed his arms and looked satisfied, like something had finally been fixed. Behind them, in the hallway, I could see more faces, curious, amused, a little cruel. I picked up my jacket from the back of the couch. The chocolate wrapper from the night before lay on the coffee table, empty. I looked at it for a second, then slipped my jacket on and said I would give them space. Chloe did not try to stop me. She just turned away and started talking to Ryan about their day, as if the conversation was just another chore done. The hallway felt longer than usual as I walked toward the stairs. My boots sounded too loud on the worn carpet. A young guy I had fixed a sink for last month stepped aside to let me pass, eyes flicking between me and his phone. Another tenant pretended to scroll, but I could see the camera lens pointed my way for a moment. When I reached the ground floor, my own phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out without thinking. A notification from a group chat I did not know I was in lit up the screen. Someone had added my number. The group name was something like Maple Court Tea. The newest message was a video thumbnail. In the frozen image, I saw my own hunched back on the couch. Chloe standing over me with her hands tight at her sides, her mouth open in mid-sentence. Above it, someone had typed a caption about drama in 3B and added a laughing emoji. My thumb hovered over the play button, but I did not press it. I just stared at the small picture of myself, caught in that moment, while the phone buzzed again with more messages and little heart reactions piling up under the clip. I did not go back to my house right away that morning. My legs carried me in the direction of the storage yard almost by habit. When you feel small, it helps to be around things you can lift, fix, move with your hands. Metal does not judge you. Broken pipes do not roll their eyes. The yard behind Maple Court is a rectangle of cracked concrete, a chain-link fence and stacks of old doors, pipes, and lumber. The air smells like dust, oil, and cut wood. It is not pretty, but it feels more honest than that third-floor hallway filled with whispers and phones. Manny was already there, leaning against the hood of the old work truck with a coffee in his hand. Manny is 59, a year older than me, with a round belly and a laugh that fills a room. He has been turning wrenches and swinging hammers longer than most of the tenants have been alive. He took one look at my face when I walked in and asked, without any jokes, if something was wrong. He said I looked like someone stole my lunch and then kicked my dog. I told him, in a few simple lines, what had happened upstairs in 3B. I kept my voice steady. I left out the part about the video. That part felt like salt. Manny listened without interrupting. He knew Chloe when she was small. He used to sneak her extra cookies from the break room when she visited me on Saturdays. When I finished, he shook his head and said he was sorry. He said kids could be cruel without meaning to, but that did not make the words hurt less. Then he asked the question he has asked me more than once over the years. He wanted to know why I still let everyone believe I am just maintenance Mark, when my name is on the papers that matter. He said I could walk into that hallway with a suit and a briefcase and change everything with one sentence. I told him what I always tell him. I said I did not buy Maple Court so people would treat me like a king. I bought it so people would have a place to live that was not falling apart, and so Chloe would always have a safety net. I told him hiding behind the maintenance job let me see what was really happening in the building. People show their true selves when they think you are no one. He snorted and said I was a better man than most, but he also said there was a fine line between being humble and letting people wipe their feet on you. I did not answer. I just picked up my toolbox and went to fix a clogged drain in 1C. While I worked that day, my mind was far away from rusted pipes and old tiles. It kept going back over years, like my life was a long hallway and I was walking it in reverse. I thought about the day I first saw Maple Court. Back then, I was fresh out of my divorce, with a box of clothes, a beat-up truck, and a bank account that looked like a bad joke. Linda and I had agreed on fair terms, but fair can still drain a man. I knew I could not rebuild by sitting still. An old friend in real estate told me about a tired building on the market. The owner was ready to retire. The numbers were ugly on the surface. Old plumbing, outdated wiring, units that needed work. The price was still scary, but it was not impossible. There was something about the place that pulled me. The bones were strong, like a tired man who still had a straight back. I spent nights at the kitchen table with a cheap calculator, scraps of paper, and a cup of coffee going cold. I added and re-added figures until my eyes burned. I knew that if I did the work myself, if I gave up trips, new clothes, and every little comfort, I could make it happen. No vacations, no fancy car. Years of no, so one day Chloe could have a big yes. When I signed the papers, my hands shook. The lawyer congratulated me, and I smiled, but mostly I felt scared. I set up a simple company with a plain name so the building would not scream, "Owned by Mark Ellis." I still carried tools more than documents, but from that day, Maple Court was mine. I became my own boss and my own risk. At first, Chloe loved the building. She was 14 then. On weekends, she would come with me, wearing old jeans and my spare cap. She would help me paint walls, her strokes too heavy, leaving streaks I had to smooth out later. She called the building our place. I let her think that. It was my favorite lie. Then Linda met Victor. Suddenly, Chloe had a second world. In that world, there were shiny floors, a big kitchen island, and vacations with real planes instead of long drives in my pickup. Victor was kind enough on the surface. He shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and offered financial advice I did not ask for. He liked to talk about smart portfolios and letting money work for you. I liked to talk about replacing valves and patching roofs. We were polite, but we were not the same. Over time, Chloe's weekends changed. She still came to Maple Court sometimes, but she came late and left early. She complained about the musty smell in the hallways and the old elevator that rattled. She talked more about her other house, the one with the pool and the big TV and the fridge that always had food. One evening, when she was 17, we had dinner at a family restaurant, the kind of place with sticky menus and noisy booths. Linda and Victor sat across from us. Chloe sat next to Victor, leaning into him when she laughed. I watched her, and I was glad she felt safe, but there was a small ache under my ribs. At one point, the conversation turned to money. Victor spoke about investments doing well. Linda hinted that maybe I should think about settling down and doing something less physical, something less risky. Chloe said she never wanted to worry about rent or bills the way she saw some people worry. I made a small joke about owning one old building and how that kept me busy. Chloe laughed and said that building did not count as real wealth because I still had to wear the same old boots and fix toilets. She said she was going to follow Victor's path instead, because he knew how to be a real success. She did not say it to be evil. She said it the way young people say many things, with no idea how deep their words can cut. I smiled and said I was happy she had options. But on the drive home alone, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. From that day, she started to talk about Victor like he was the model. She told me how he explained compound interest and mutual funds. She said he was the kind of dad who understood money. I told her I was glad she was learning. I kept the rest to myself. Years passed. Chloe went to college, then came back with a degree, an entry-level marketing job, and a head full of big ideas. And I offered to let her move into a small unit at Maple Court at a discount. She accepted, but she treated it like any other rental. When the sink leaked, she called the office, not me. When I showed up with my toolbox, she introduced me to her roommates as my dad, but also like the maintenance guy. It stung, but I told myself it was just a joke. Then Ryan showed up. He was loud, charming, and full of opinions. He talked about fighting systems, about greedy landlords, about older generations ruining everything. He talked about real change, while Chloe nodded, eyes shining. Sometimes he added a casual remark about how men like me were stuck in old ways, just patching holes while smart people built new worlds. I tried to see the good in him. He made Chloe laugh. He remembered her coffee order. But he also pushed her away from me in invisible ways. If I suggested something practical, like saving a little each month, he would roll his eyes and tell Chloe she did not have to live with the same fear and small thinking he claimed my generation had. I watched as Chloe's respect for me slowly shifted from quiet warmth to polite patience, then from patience to mild annoyance. Every time money came up, she looked to Victor's model, not mine. My work boots and calloused hands became, in her mind, signs of failure, not proof of responsibility. Still, I believed there were lines she would never cross. I believed that even if she saw me as old-fashioned, she knew I had broken my body more than once to keep a roof over our heads. I believed the daughter who once clapped when I fixed a wobbly chair still lived somewhere inside the woman raising her voice in 3B. Standing in the storage yard that day, wiping grease off my fingers, I realized how wrong I had been. Later, on my lunch break, I drove out to a little diner near the office where Chloe worked. I did not plan to talk to her. I just wanted to see that she was all right, that her anger had cooled. I sat at a corner table with a cheap burger and my back to the wall. Through the big front window, I saw her walk by with a group of coworkers and Ryan. They went into the cafe next door, the trendy one with the plants and the chalkboard menu. From where I sat, I could see them through the glass. They leaned over a small table, drinks in hand. Chloe talked with her hands, and the others watched her. Ryan made a big show of something on his phone, turning the screen so they all could see. A few of them laughed too hard. I could not hear their words, but I did not need to. Their faces were enough. Eyes widened, smiles turned sharp. Heads tilted with that look people get when they enjoy seeing someone else's mess. I watched my daughter's mouth form shapes I knew well. I knew the story she was telling. Old man, couch, rent, boundaries. Ryan said something that made everyone laugh. Chloe leaned back, lips tight in a proud line, like someone who had finally done the hard, adult thing and set a limit. One of her friends mimed tossing something out the door. Another shook their head with an expression that clearly said, "Wow. I could never let my parents do that either." I stared down at my burger until the meat went cold. The noise of the diner around me became a blur. In my head, I heard Manny's earlier words again about the line between humility and being a doormat. After they left the cafe, I waited a few minutes and then paid my check. The afternoon passed in a haze of small jobs. I fixed a light fixture in the stairwell. I adjusted a door that kept catching. I cleaned up a spill in the laundry room. People thanked me, called me sir, and went back to their lives. By the time my shift ended, the sun was low. I drove home slowly, the radio off. My house felt empty when I walked in. The fridge hummed, the clock on the wall ticked. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone on the wood in front of me, screen dark. Part of me wanted to call Chloe and apologize again, even though I had already said sorry for making her uncomfortable. That part of me was loud, because it was the same part that had always tried to keep the peace, that had always told me to bend before I broke. Another part of me, smaller but growing, told me to do nothing. It told me to sit with the hurt and really look at it for once instead of pushing it away. It told me to remember exactly what she had said and how easily the words had come out of her mouth. I was still sitting there, fingers tracing the edge of my phone, when the screen lit up and buzzed. A message had arrived. The name at the top made my chest tighten. It was from Chloe. The message from Chloe sat on the screen like a small glowing stone. She had written, "Hey, can we talk later? I don't want things to be weird. But you need to understand my side too." I stared at that line for a long time. It was not an apology. It was not even equal ground. It already assumed I was in the wrong and needed education. Still, it was a hand reaching out, even if the hand felt more like a lecturer's than a daughter's. I typed and deleted 3 answers before I settled on something short. I told her we could talk in person. I added a time. That evening, after she got home from work. I said I would bring some tools to fix the crooked curtain rod in her bedroom, like she had asked a week ago and then forgotten about. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Modern approval in one small yellow symbol. The hours between that message and the meeting dragged. I tried to nap, but my mind kept replaying her voice in the apartment, the way it rose and hardened, the way she said, "Pay rent or leave," like I was a stranger on her couch instead of the man who held her when she threw up from a stomach bug at 6 years old. By late afternoon, I gave up on rest and got up. I washed my face, changed into a clean work shirt, and grabbed my small toolbox. When I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, I paused. The man looking back at me had gray in his beard and lines around his eyes. He also had the same set jaw he wore years ago when he signed the papers for Maple Court. A quiet, stubborn line that only came out when something important was at stake. For most of my life, that expression showed up when I was fighting for Chloe. Suddenly I wondered what it would look like if, just once, I fought for myself. The thought surprised me so much I almost laughed. It stayed with me as I drove to the building, as I parked in my usual spot by the dumpsters, and as I took the back stairs instead of the front. On the 3rd floor, the hallway was busy. Someone had propped open the door to 3B. I could hear multiple voices inside. Laughter, the scrape of chairs, the faint clink of bottles. Ryan's voice carried over the others, loud and energized. I stepped into the doorway and saw more people than usual packed into the small living room. Tenants from other floors. The guy from 2A Chloe had called creepy. A young couple from 4C who always paid late and then blamed their own boss for underpaying them. A girl from 1D who worked at the coffee shop and always gave Ryan free refills. They were gathered around the coffee table. On it lay stacks of printed papers and a big marker. Someone had drawn the words "tenant action" across the top sheet. Ryan was in the middle of an animated speech about how we were not going to take unfair rent increases anymore. He talked about organizing, about calling the news, about making the landlord feel the heat. Chloe saw me in the doorway and stiffened. Her smile faded. Ryan turned, saw me, and grinned in a way that did not reach his eyes. He said I had perfect timing because they were just talking about housing justice and tenants' right to stand up to greedy owners. I said I was just there to fix the curtain rod and talk to Chloe. I tried to keep my tone neutral. It was their home. I did not want to walk in like an enemy. Ryan laughed and said I could stay and listen since I was a tenant too, in a way. A couple of people chuckled. One of them looked at my toolbox and then at my face, trying to decide if I was part of the staff or just Chloe's sad dad. Chloe stepped closer and said we could talk in her room after the meeting. She said the tenant group was important. They were finally doing something about the landlord ignoring them and treating them like numbers. She said the last rent increase was the last straw. I felt something cold settle in my chest. The last rent increase had barely covered the jump in heating costs that winter and the new insurance. I knew exactly how much. I had sat with the numbers late at night, choosing the smallest increase that would keep the building from sliding into debt. These people had no idea. They just saw the piece of paper taped to their door with a higher number on it. Ryan started passing around a sign-up sheet. He told them they could draft a collective letter, refuse to accept more increases, and if necessary, threaten to go to the local news with stories of landlord neglect. He threw in words like exploitation and systemic abuse. They sounded big and righteous in his mouth. I listened as he listed neglects I knew were already fixed or scheduled. He called the elevator unsafe when I had just paid for a full inspection last month. He said the laundry room was moldy when I had spent a weekend bleaching and repainting it myself. He complained about slow responses to maintenance when the only slow responses came when tenants refused to answer their doors or moved their junk out of the way. No one questioned him. They nodded. Anger feels good when someone gives it shape. My toolbox felt heavier in my hand. I shifted it and cleared my throat. I said quietly that maybe they could also consider how the building had improved in the last years. I reminded them about the new windows, the upgraded heating, the fixed roofs. I said sometimes costs went up for everyone, not just tenants, and maybe, just maybe, the owner was doing the best he could. Ryan scoffed. He asked why I was defending some faceless landlord who probably sat at home stacking cash while we all worked. He said maintenance guys like me should be on their side, not the other side. He said something else too, and I remember every word. He said, "With respect, Mark, you're a nice guy, but you're still just a guy who fixes toilets. You don't understand how power works. We're trying to build leverage here. This is bigger than you." He turned to Chloe and added with a grin that this was why their generation had to take over, because their parents' generation had accepted scraps and called it a feast. Chloe did not argue. She did not say, "That man owns this building with his bare hands." She did not say, "That man works 60 hours a week, so you have heat in winter." She just looked down and then back up at him, cheeks a little pink, like she knew he had crossed a small line but was not willing to step away from him to defend me. She said, softly but clearly, that she agreed with him about landlords. She said they had to push or nothing would change. Then she said something that felt like stronger glue than her pay rent or leave line, because it held her position in place. She said she was done letting her feelings about family get in the way of doing what was right for herself. She said she was an adult now, and adults had to choose their own side. For a moment, the room went quiet. My ears rang a little. I looked at her, really looked. The girl who used to sit on my shoulders at parades was gone. In her place stood a woman who saw me as a conflict of interest. I nodded once and said I understood she had chosen. I told her I would not interrupt their meeting. I said I would fix the curtain rod another time. As I turned to go, the guy from 2A, the one she did not like, said under his breath that some people of my age should be grateful they even had a couch to crash on. A few people laughed again. In the hallway, I felt something inside me shift, not break. Breaking is loud. This was quiet, like a track changing under a train. From the outside, the train still moves, but it is no longer going where it was before. I went back down the stairs, out the rear door, and crossed the small yard behind the building. Instead of going home, I walked to the side entrance where the management office was. Sarah's car was already gone for the day. The lights were off. I stood there a moment, staring at the closed blinds and the small plaque that said Maple Court Management. Behind those blinds were files and folders with every tenant's name, payment history, and complaint. Behind those blinds was the paper trail of what this building really was. I had asked Sarah to keep my name off the public surface as much as possible. It made life simpler. For the first time, I wondered who I had really been protecting with that choice. On the way home, I did not turn on the radio. I listened to the sound of the engine and my own breathing. The evening sky was a flat gray. My hands on the steering wheel did not shake this time. They were steady, the way they are when I know exactly what needs to be done in a broken room. At my house, I went straight past the kitchen and into the small room I call my office. It used to be Chloe's room when she was little. The wallpaper with clouds is gone now, but sometimes I still see it when I close my eyes. Against one wall stands a cheap metal filing cabinet. It is not much to look at, just 4 drawers and a handle that sticks when it is humid. To most people, it is just office storage. To me, it is the spine of my life. I sat down in the chair and pulled the top drawer open. Inside were labeled folders, each with my handwriting on the tabs. Maple Court expenses, repairs, insurance, tax. The second drawer had other folders. One was labeled simply Deed, another Ellis Family Trust, another Maple Court LLC. My fingers lingered on the trust folder. I pulled it out and laid it on the desk, closed. I did not open it yet. The weight of it was enough. I had set that trust up years ago, when Chloe was in high school. The idea was simple. If anything happened to me, the building would be managed by someone I trusted, and the income would go to Chloe. Even if she made bad choices, even if her job fell through, she would have rent money, food, and a safe place to land. Sitting there in the dim light of my small office, I realized I had built a safety net for someone who saw me as extra weight on her own safety rope. The trust did not protect me, it protected her, no matter how she behaved. I am not a vindictive man. Anger comes to me slow, and when it comes, it usually cools quickly. But that night, something else came instead of anger. Clarity. Clarity is not hot, it is cold and straight. It lines up facts in a row and makes you look at them. The facts were simple. I owned Maple Court. I worked myself sore to keep it standing. Chloe enjoyed its safety while cursing the person who made it possible. She believed another man was her real model for success. She told me to pay rent or leave in a building I had bought with my broken hands. I could not change how she felt. I could not force respect into her, but I could stop building new cushions under people who jumped up and down on me. I put the trust folder back in the drawer, but not all the way. I left it half out, like a bookmark in a long chapter. Then I pulled out the folder labeled Maple Court LLC and one called Tenants Summary. I did not open those either, not yet. Instead, I sat back, closed my eyes for a moment, and thought about the word Manny had used earlier, leverage. I had always thought of leverage as something used to lift a heavy thing. A crowbar under a stuck board, a jack under a car. Something quiet, powerful, and precise. Not a shouted threat in a living room. I reached for my phone. My fingers moved on their own, opening my contacts. I scrolled past Chloe, past Manny, past Sarah, management, until I found a name I had not called in a while. It was under P. I hesitated for just a second. Then I pressed the number and held the phone to my ear. It rang twice. Then a calm, familiar voice answered and greeted me, asking how I had been and what I needed. I took a breath and said, in a steady voice I barely recognized as my own, that I thought it was time we talked about my building. Priya's voice on the phone brought back a different version of me. Years ago, I had sat in her office with shaking hands, signing the first papers for Maple Court and the first pages of the Ellis Family Trust. Back then, I was scared but hopeful. Now I was just tired and very, very clear. She asked how I was. I told her I needed to talk about my building. I said things had changed with my daughter. I said I was thinking about options. Priya did not rush me. She said we should meet in person, go over everything calmly. She offered a time for the next afternoon. I agreed. When I hung up, I sat for a few more minutes in the quiet office. The folders on the desk felt like doorways. For years I had walked past them, choosing to live only in the hallway, dealing with pipes and paint and broken locks. I had never gone all the way through the door. It was time. The next morning, I went to Maple Court early, before most tenants were out of bed. The air was cool and smelled faintly of damp concrete. In the lobby, the meme about evil landlords was still taped near the mailboxes. Someone had added a doodle of horns to the cartoon landlord's head. I looked at it, then at the real mailboxes themselves that I had sanded and repainted with my own hands. I let the picture sink in and then let it go. The management office light was already on. Sarah sat behind the desk, a mug in her hand, her dark hair pulled back. She has that look some people have when they handle a lot of paperwork. Focused, tired, but steady. She greeted me by name and asked if I was there about a work order. I told her I wanted to look at tenant records. She raised an eyebrow because usually I stayed on the maintenance side and let her handle the numbers. I closed the door behind me, sat down in one of the plastic chairs, and said that things upstairs had reached a point where I needed to see everything clearly. I did not tell her every detail about Chloe and Ryan. I just said there were issues in 3B and that I wanted to look at all long-term payment histories and complaints, not only theirs. Sarah knows who signs her paychecks. She also knows I prefer to stay in the background. She studied my face for a moment and seemed to understand that something had shifted. Then she turned to her computer and started pulling up files. She printed spreadsheets and stapled them into bundles. One stack for each floor, dates, amounts, check numbers, notes about bounced payments and late fees. She added another stack, incident and violation reports, noise complaints, unauthorized pets, extra people staying long-term, unauthorized Airbnb rentals when tenants tried to make extra cash off units they barely paid for. She slid the piles across the desk to me. I paged through them slowly. The pages for 3B were thicker than most. The payment column had more red marks than black. Notes about rent extensions, reminders sent, warnings that went unanswered. A couple of handwritten notes from Sarah about Ryan insisting he would handle it and then not doing so. The violation reports were worse. Multiple complaints about late-night parties on weeknights, loud arguments in the hallway, and strangers moving in and out with suitcases. Photos printed from a neighbor's phone showing new faces going into 3B with weekend bags. An attached screenshot of a listing for a cute city apartment that matched their living room exactly. I remembered all the times Chloe had said they were just barely keeping up. It seemed they had found a way to make extra money and still decided paying on time was optional. I asked Sarah, in a quiet voice, how often tenants like that actually get evicted. She sighed and said not often. Most owners avoid the trouble. They want full buildings, even if it means a few chronic headaches. It costs money to go through the process. There is always the risk of bad reviews online. I told her I understood. Then I asked her to prepare full, updated files on all units with repeated late payments or serious violations. I told her I wanted clear, clean records, just in case the owner needed them for any decision in the near future. Sarah looked at me, really looked. In that moment, I think she remembered every conversation we had ever had about keeping my name off the front. She tilted her head and asked if the owner was thinking of selling. I shrugged and said nothing had been decided. I just wanted to see all my options. That was the first time in a long time I used the word my in connection with Maple Court in front of another person. She nodded slowly. She said she would have the files ready in a couple of days and would email me summaries. I thanked her and left. From there, I drove to a bank branch across town, not the one closest to the building. I did not want to run into any tenants there. The loan officer, a middle-aged man with a neat tie, greeted me politely. He remembered me from years back when I refinanced to pay for the new heating system. He asked how the building was doing. I told him vacancies were low, but costs were high. I asked if he could give me an idea of what Maple Court might be worth now if a serious investor wanted to buy it. I made it sound like a hypothetical question, but he was not stupid. He pulled up recent sales in the area on his screen. Newer numbers replaced the old ones in my memory. The value had climbed more than I realized. Old buildings with solid bones, close to public transport, had become very popular with investors who did not mind putting money into upgrades. He printed a rough estimate, a range of what I could expect depending on the buyer and the speed of the sale. The lower end of the range was already a life-changing number for a man like me. The higher end was something I had never imagined touching. He said I was in a strong position, low vacancy, ongoing improvements, a decent location. He said, in his polished bank voice, that I could exit quite comfortably if I ever chose to. I folded the paper and put it in my inside pocket. It felt heavier than it was. From the bank, I drove to Priya's office. The building was glass and steel, a different world from Maple Court's brick and peeling paint. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and new carpet. In her office, the desk was big and uncluttered. She had my old file open in front of her when I came in. She asked how I had been managing. I told her the truth, that I had worked, slept, and tried to be a good father. I added after a pause that the last part seemed to be the one I had failed at. Priya does not rush to comfort or judge. She asked what happened. I told her about Chloe moving into Maple Court, about Ryan, about the speech in 3B, about the words she used. I kept my tone calm, but I did not soften the details. Priya listened, her fingers steepled under her chin. When I finished, she looked at the file and reminded me what we had set up years ago. The Ellis Family Trust, the Maple Court LLC, the way the building, on paper, belonged to the company, and the company, in turn, was held by the trust with me as trustee. She reminded me of something else, too, something I had almost forgotten. When we first wrote the trust, I had asked for conditions. Not conditions that would punish a teenager for a bad grade or a bad haircut, but something that would reflect respect and basic care between family. At my request, she had included language that allowed me to adjust distributions if my only child chose to cut me out of her life or publicly disown or humiliate me without cause. At the time, it had felt almost silly. Chloe was 16, still hugging me in public. We had both smiled a little at the idea, but Priya wrote it exactly as I asked. Now, years later, she read that paragraph aloud in a low, even voice. The words were dry, legal, and clear. They did not mention specific scenes or phrases. They talked about patterns of behavior, about repeated intent, about the trustee's right to protect the estate from being used as a reward for cruelty. Each sentence landed like a quiet knock on a door inside me. She asked if I was thinking about making changes. I said I did not know yet. I said I was not there to ask how to hurt my daughter. I was there to ask how to stop hurting myself. Then we spoke about the building itself. I asked what would happen if I sold Maple Court, what steps I would need to take, how tenants would be treated, how long it would take, what it would mean for me, for the LLC, for the trust. She walked me through the process: listing or private sale, negotiation, contracts, inspections, closing. She reminded me that any serious buyer would look hard at payment histories and violation reports. She said an organized file would give me leverage to insist on a better price and a clean handoff. When she spoke about tenants, she was careful. Tenants have rights. Leases must be honored or properly ended. Evictions must follow the law, especially for repeated violations or non-payment. Selling the building would not mean throwing people into the street overnight. It would mean someone else, perhaps more strict, would decide who stayed and who went, under the same laws I had been gentle with. She asked again what I wanted. I sat with the question for a long moment. In the end, I told her the simplest truth. I said I wanted to stop working myself into the ground for people who cursed me to my face without knowing who I was. I said I wanted my remaining years to not be spent crawling under sinks for tenants who filmed my humiliation and posted it for fun. Priya nodded. She said that wanting that was not cruel, it was human. She did not push me to decide that day. She suggested I gather all information first, then we could discuss concrete steps. We made a list together. Full tenant files from Sarah, a current valuation of Maple Court, a review of the trust to confirm what changes were possible. She would go over the old documents, note any updates needed, and be ready if I chose to act. When I left her office, the sun was lower in the sky. The glass door reflected a tired man with a straight spine. I walked back to my truck and sat for a moment without starting the engine. For years, my identity had been wrapped around 3 roles: worker, father, landlord, and secret. 2 of those roles were killing the third. If I kept going as I had, I would end up as nothing but sore joints and a daughter who only called when she needed something or wanted to set a new boundary. That night, I went back to Maple Court one more time. I told myself I was just there to check the boiler, but really I wanted to feel the building with this new knowledge in my pocket. In the lobby, a few tenants were collecting mail. Chloe was not there. Ryan was not there. The girl from 1D smiled at me and asked if I had seen the flyer about the next tenant meeting. She said they were going to draft a strong letter, really put pressure on the landlord now. I asked if she thought that was wise, given some tenants' payment histories and violations. She rolled her eyes and said the landlord had more power than all of them anyway. She said someone had to push back, or nothing would change. I did not answer. I just watched as she pulled a bill out of her mailbox, glanced at it, and stuffed it angrily into her bag. Later, when the lobby was empty, I checked my own small mailbox. Inside was the usual mix of junk mail and one plain envelope from Sarah's office with my name on it. I opened it and saw a summary sheet she had already started, a list of units with repeated late payments and violations, a neat column of names and unit numbers. At the top of that list, bold and clear, was 3B. I folded the paper and put it in the same pocket as the bank estimate. 2 thin sheets that, together, changed the shape of my world. I was about to lock the office door behind me when my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Sarah had sent a copy of the summary to my account, and below it, a forwarded message. The subject line of the forwarded message was short and sharp. It said, "Interested buyer, meeting request for Maple Court." The email sat open on my phone, the subject line glowing up at me. "Interested buyer, meeting request for Maple Court." Sarah had forwarded it from her work address. Underneath, the original message was from someone named Karen Chen, representing an investment group I did not recognize. The email was short and polite. She said her clients were looking for stable, multi-unit properties in our area. She had heard Maple Court might be open to offers. She asked if the owner would be willing to meet to discuss a potential purchase. For a year, maybe more, I would have closed that email and told myself it was not the right time. There were always reasons to keep going: a tenant expecting a baby, a hallway that still needed paint, a promise I had made to myself about keeping the building until I died. Now, I stared at Karen's name and realized something simple and hard to admit. Nothing in my promise said I had to keep being the one who took every hit. I replied to Sarah, telling her we could set up a meeting. I asked her not to mention it to anyone else yet. She answered quickly, saying she understood and would arrange something neutral and professional. The meeting was set for 3 days later at an office downtown. Those 3 days felt different from the hundreds before them. I still did my jobs. Fixed a loose handrail, replaced a broken mailbox lock, cleared a slow drain, but everything I touched felt temporary. The building I had once imagined dying in now felt like a chapter I might actually close. Chloe did not call during those days. She sent one short text asking if I was still upset and saying she hoped I could respect her boundaries. I typed out a reply, then erased it. In the end, I just wrote that I hoped her week was going well and that I was busy with work. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. When the morning of the meeting came, I put on the only jacket I own that is closer to office than yard. It pulled a little at the shoulders, but it was clean. I drove to the address Sarah had sent. The building was all glass and pale stone, the lobby quiet and cool. In the conference room, Sarah sat at one end of the table with a folder in front of her. Across from her sat a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a neat blouse, Karen Chen. She stood, shook my hand firmly, and thanked me for agreeing to come. She did not waste time. She asked how long I had owned Maple Court, what improvements I had made, what the tenant mix was like. She already had Sarah's reports and the bank's general numbers. She had done her homework. I appreciated that. I answered her questions plainly. I talked about the new heating system, the windows, the roof repairs. I did not complain about tenants. I let the payment histories and violation summaries in Sarah's folder do that silently. Karen talked about her plans. She said her group liked to buy older buildings and bring them up to a higher standard, then manage them with clear rules. She used words like efficiency and enforcement. She did not sound cruel, just firm. At one point, she asked why I was considering selling now, after all these years. I could have given 100 small reasons. Instead, I gave her one big true one. I said I was tired of being the only one who cared that the building stood straight. I said I was ready to stop being the person everyone blamed when something broke, even when I had just finished fixing the last thing. She nodded like she had heard this before from other small owners. Maybe she had. We did not hammer out every detail that day. She gave a rough offer range, and I knew from the bank's estimate that it was fair. She said she would send a formal proposal through Priya since the building ran through the trust and the LLC. I said that was fine. After the meeting, I went directly to Priya's office. She already had an email from Karen when I arrived. They spoke in their own language for a while. Terms, contingencies, closing dates. I listened, but my mind kept circling one thought. This could really happen. Priya laid out what I needed to sign for her to start moving the pieces. There were no dramatic speeches, no heavy music. Just a pen on paper, my name written in small, steady letters. We also went back to the trust. She reminded me of the clause we had discussed. She asked calmly if I wanted to adjust future distributions now that my main asset might turn into cash instead of bricks. I thought of Chloe's face in 3B, tight with anger as she told me to pay rent or leave. I thought of her in the cafe, laughing with her friends about setting boundaries with parents who couldn't get it together. I thought of all the times I had bent over backwards to keep her safe, even when she did not know it. I told Priya I did not want to cut my daughter off completely. I am not made of stone. But I did not want her to see me as both burden and endless safety net anymore. I wanted her to understand that choices had weight, so we made adjustments. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic on the page, just quiet shifts in who would benefit and under what conditions. Priya explained every line. I listened, asked a question here and there, and then picked up the pen again. By the time I walked out of her office, the sun was dipping low. The city looked the same, only I knew that, on paper, my life had begun to turn in a new direction. A week later, after inspections and emails and more signatures than I cared to count, Priya called me. Her voice was calm, almost casual. She said the final documents were ready. The sale had a date. The transfer would be official soon. After that, she said, you'll no longer be the owner of Maple Court. You'll just be Mark Ellis. For the first time, that sentence did not scare me. It felt like taking off a heavy tool belt at the end of a very long shift. On the morning everything was set to move, I went to Maple Court early. The management office printer was already chattering, spitting out pages of official letters. Sarah moved between the desk and the machine, stacking notices in neat piles. She handed me one of the top sheets. At the very top were a few short lines in formal language about new ownership and updated management. Underneath, in some stacks, was a second page. More personal, more direct. I did not read every word. I did not need to. I knew what those pages meant for certain units, including 3B. They meant that the days of warnings without consequences were over. Sarah asked if I wanted to help tape the first notice in the lobby. I shook my head. I told her I would be outside. Then I walked out of the office, past the meme about landlords, past the mailboxes, and stepped into the courtyard just as the first tenants began to come out holding white envelopes in their hands. By mid-morning, the courtyard at Maple Court felt different. Tenants stepped out one by one, white envelopes in their hands, brows furrowed. Some opened them right there. Others waited until their friends gathered around. Murmurs rose and fell like small waves. I stood near the back gate, hands in my pockets, watching. The first page in every envelope was the same, a calm letter on new letterhead, Chen Holdings. It explained that the building had been sold. Rent payments from now on would go to a different account. Maintenance requests would go through a new portal. Too many names and numbers for most people to care about. The second page was not the same. Only some tenants had that extra sheet. The ones who had treated paying rent and following the lease like optional chores. Those pages talked about violations, about repeated late payments, about notices already given. They listed dates. They used phrases like failure to cure and termination of tenancy. At the bottom, they named a date when they would have to leave if they did not fix things in time. 3B had that extra page. From across the courtyard, I saw Chloe tear through the first sheet and flip to the second. Her eyes moved fast at first, then slowed. Her face went pale, then red. Ryan grabbed the paper from her and scanned it, jaw tightening. He turned to the small crowd and raised his voice. He said the new owner was trying to scare them. He said no one could just come in and push people out like this. He told them they had power, that they would fight, that they would not move. Some nodded. Some did not. Fear has a way of cutting through slogans. Chloe pulled out her phone and made a call. Her back was to me, but I could guess who she was trying to reach. My own phone buzzed in my pocket. I did not answer. The law gave them a set number of days. During those weeks, I kept my distance. I still did my job until the sale closed, but I did it from the edges. Changing a lock here, checking a pipe there. I watched the building shift from one set of hands to another. Some tenants started packing early. Boxes appeared in hallways. Old couches vanished. Others stayed stubborn until letters from the new management turned firmer. Some paid what they owed and promised to follow the rules. Their second pages vanished in follow-up notices. 3B did not change much. The music was quieter for a few days, then loud again. The listing for the cute city apartment stayed up. The rent stayed late. Ryan stayed on his soapbox. Time moved, steady and uncaring. Paper moved with it. Finally, the date on the extra sheet came. That morning, the sky was gray and low. 2 moving trucks idled by the curb, engines rumbling. A sheriff's deputy stood near the entrance, hat low, clipboard in hand. Karen was there too, in a plain coat, talking quietly with Sarah and the deputy. Tenants clustered in small groups, coats pulled tight, envelopes in their hands. Some were there to move, some were there just to watch. I stood near the base of the old maple tree, close enough to see, far enough to be another face in the background. Chloe came out of 3B with her hair pulled back and a jacket thrown on over pajamas. She looked younger than she had in months, not in a good way. She ran to the deputy, papers flapping in her hand. She said something fast, her arms moving. He answered, calm and short, and pointed to the dates on her letter. She stepped back like he had pushed her. Then she pulled out her phone again and hit a contact with shaking fingers. My phone rang. I watched the screen light up with her name. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail again. Then I saw her face, turned toward the street, eyes afraid in a way I had never wanted to see. I answered. Her voice came out in a rush. She said they were being thrown out. She said the new owner was heartless. She said they did not have money for a new place. She begged me to come and talk to someone, to help them, to at least loan them enough to satisfy the notice. She called me Dad again. I listened to the whole flood without interrupting. When she finally stopped to breathe, I asked where she was. She said she was in the courtyard. I told her to turn around. She spun, confused, and her eyes moved across the crowd until they found me. For a second, she looked like a little girl lost in a store. Then she started walking quickly toward me, phone still pressed to her ear, even though I was right in front of her. She lowered the phone and grabbed my sleeve. She spoke fast, saying that I had to talk to the landlord, that he might listen to an older man, that I could explain they were good people who had just messed up, that I could stop this. I let her finish. Then, in a voice as calm as I could make it, I told her I could not. She blinked, not understanding. She asked why. She said I always helped. It was what I did. I told her, in front of her, Ryan, and anyone listening, that I had already done all I could. I told her I had done it weeks ago when I sold Maple Court. I watched the words sink in. Ryan frowned. Chloe's mouth opened and closed. She asked what I meant, so I told her the truth I had kept behind tools and uniforms for years. I told her I had been the landlord all along, that the faceless owner she and Ryan had cursed in their meetings was not a stranger, but her father, that I had bought the building when she was a child, so she would always have a safe place if she needed it. I told her I had listened while she called men like me greedy and lazy, while she laughed with friends about landlords who should sell and retire. I reminded her gently of the day she told me to pay rent or leave in a building I had carried on my back for half my life. Her face went completely still. Ryan tried to jump in. He said this could not be legal, that I had tricked them, that he would sue, that no judge would allow this. Karen stepped closer then, her tone cool. She explained that every notice had followed the lease and the law. She said payments had been late, violations had been repeated, warnings had been ignored. The deputy nodded once, backing her up. Chloe looked from Karen to me. Her voice dropped. She asked if I would at least lend them the money to stay, or co-sign a new place, or use whatever I got from the sale to help them get on their feet. I thought of the trust papers, of Priya reading that clause, of all the times I had carried Chloe in my arms when she was sick, and all the times she had stepped over me on the couch like I was clutter. I told her, in a soft, even voice, that she was an adult now, like she had been so proud to say. Adults live with their choices. Adults pay their own rent. I added one last thing. I said that the safety net I had built for her in my will had been changed after she made it clear she did not want me taking up space in her life. I did not shout it. I did not list numbers. I just let her know that the future she had counted on without respecting the person behind it was no longer guaranteed. She stared at me like she did not recognize the man in front of her. Behind us, the deputy cleared his throat and said they had to continue. Karen turned back to her clipboard. Movers started up the truck ramp. A box slipped from someone's hands and hit the pavement with a dull thud. I pulled my old key ring from my pocket. For the last time, I looked at the little brass keys that had opened every door in Maple Court. Then I walked over to Karen and placed them in her hand. She thanked me. The deputy nodded. Chloe's phone buzzed again in her limp hand, notifications piling up. I turned my own phone off mid-vibration, slid it into my pocket, and walked out through the side gate without looking back, leaving behind the hum of engines, the scrape of boxes, and the stunned silence of a daughter who had finally seen exactly who I was.